As Dave said, I'm Michael Spraggins, CEO of Spraggins, Inc. I'm the second generation in this business, so I'm G2, right? And our core Evergreen business is in the building products and construction services space. So when Dave asked me to present, I said, why do you want me to present? And I know many of you out here and your businesses are far better and bigger than mine. And he said, you took a business with really difficult economics and expanded it through adjacencies to diversify and make it stronger. And so I decided, well, that's the story then. That's what I'll talk about. And in preparing, I came up with an analogy for my talk, and that is surrounding my favorite plant, which is, oops, I didn't click, sorry, first slide. That surrounds my favorite plant, which is the southern live oak tree. So that's a picture of a live oak in my front yard, kind of looking up. And I've planted a live oak in every house I've owned. And I love these trees, right? They're beautiful. They grow and they branch. They can live hundreds of years, right? They have this beautiful branching structure. And they're interesting. Even in Florida, where it's hot most of the time, they're seasonal, right? So they grow a lot in the summer. They kind of drop their leaves a little bit in the winter, which is like my business. And their roots are wide, right? They have these really wide roots, which is pretty cool. And then the interesting thing about these oak trees, when you prune them, they get better. So I love my oaks. Every couple of years, I'll have a tree guy come out and I'll point at that branch and that branch, and we'll thoughtfully prune the trees. And I just look at them every day and they grow. So I love these oak trees, right? And that's much like sort of my business. It has been pruned a lot. It grows in spurts. It doesn't grow at some even compounded rate, It hasn't been a 20-mile march business. It grows a lot, and then it cuts back, and then it grows again. It's very lumpy growth, and that's been my experience. And so I think that the parallel is interesting. So I find that there are many truths in the natural world that I bring back into my business or life. I watch how things grow, and I think of analogies back into life. I also look to the Bible for what it talks about, and it's interesting that this concept of pruning is there as well, and that it seems to indicate pruning is actually good, not bad, right? So when you lop off one of these branches, the kind of juice that comes through the roots, or whatever they call it, sap or stuff, it goes to the remaining branches, and the remaining branches actually grow faster. So right after you prune these trees, they have a little surge of growth. And I wonder if that's the same for us, and it's for sure the same for my business. Okay, so pruning, right? These are all lists of things that have failed that I have tried. The list is actually longer than this. I just only put 7. And so these are businesses or divisions or efforts that I invested real time. We invested real money into in our effort to diversify. And, we struck out on all of them. Either we cut them and pruned them because they didn't work, or they got pruned, right? And so failure is a really big piece of my story because I have failed a lot, right? But the pruning is interesting because the business has continued to gain character as it's diversified. Okay, so enough about pruning and failure and oak trees. Like, what's the business story? So the business story starts in 1980 in this warehouse where my dad bought a carpet business that had 2 employees and $400,000 of revenue. He put his life saving, $10,000, sold his life insurance policy for $10,000 and put a down payment on this business that was in that warehouse. And I started going to that warehouse when I was a kid, working there. And he sold carpet, installed and sold carpet to pretty much anybody who would buy it, right? And so I go off to college in the early 90s, or in the late 80s. Then I go work for Arthur Andersen in the 90s in Atlanta. And I had a decision to make. I was in Atlanta with Andersen, and I was going to decide, was I going to go to Wall Street and try to be an investment banker, right? Or was I going to go back to Orlando and buy my dad's business and use that as my platform? By this time, the business had gotten up to about $3 million in sales, about a dozen employees, and it was a huge success. My dad was the first in his family to go to college, And so that was, but it was a 12-person business. It was, what do I do? Obviously, I decided to move back to Orlando. And so when I got back, I realized a couple of things pretty quick, right? Number one, our core customer was the home builder. And home building is a cyclical, right? The second thing was, Florida. Well, the next thing is that Florida is historically a boom-bust state. So I've been in Florida multiple generations, and we're really a boom-bust state. So we were in a cyclical business in a cyclical region. The next concept is that we were a commodity, right? Our customers saw us, our product service, really, we were super commoditized. And then finally, we had a high degree of customer concentration. So we had significant customer concentration. We were a cyclical and we were a commodity. And that combination was bad, bad, bad. And so from then on, the entire strategy has been make the business better and mitigate some of those risks. So things started to work, right? We started to work hard, began to grow the business, and things really took off. So it's the 90s. I'm having success. I'm learning the business. I've bought my father out. By, I guess, 97, I think, I was the CEO and running the business. So here I was in my 20s, running the business, growing as fast as I could grow it. And I started getting good feedback. So I'd go to these conferences and people would say, I'd make me feel like I had the golden touch. And so what did I do when everyone told me I had the golden touch? I believed them, right? I'm like, yes, totally, I believe you. And then what I did was everything at once. I did like 5 things all at once. I committed sort of all the classic sins. I outkicked my coverage in so many ways, lost internal control. Anyway, wound up having to do sort of a self-turnaround on the business. And I wound up in about $5 million of debt. Here I was about 30 years old or something. And we were in significant debt. And I had an older mentor advisor, and he gave me this quote. He said, look, you need to make mistakes young. That way you have time to recover. He's like, you got a ton of time. This is just like getting an MBA. And I'm like, wait a second, MBA is $200,000. This is $5 million. And regardless, those were great lessons, a great experience, and that's where we were at that point. Okay, so we're recovering. I did a self-turnaround. We're building the business back, fixed some of the mistakes. And I'm reading Inc. magazine. I loved Inc. back then. And there was an article on SRC, Jack Stack's company, the great game of business guy. And this is a diagram that I tore out of this article in Inc. magazine about 20 years ago. And I loved it because SRC, to the way I saw it, started as a highly commoditized cyclical, much as my situation. And what they'd done is they created all these profit centers and adjacencies. And I loved that. And that was my vision. That was my map for the future. Tore it out, put it in my desk drawer at home. It's still there today, right? And that was the vision for where I wanted to go. I had a plan, right? It was that sort of plan. Okay, so things are going great, right? We're growing. We added tile. We doubled our revenue per house in sort of hard surface. We expanded in a few different ways, and the business is rocking. So we're going good again. And then what happens? The Great Recession happens. And yeah, that's true. We went from 134 employees to 17 employees in 18 months. About 8 rounds of layoffs. I mean, we were squarely in the path of the Great Recession. Orlando, Florida, home builder. It was our only customer really, still at the time, and we just got hammered. And that was brutal, you know. It felt like death, sort of all of that almost auguring in, and that's where we were in the Great Recession. But out of the Great Recession came a gift, the gift of the recession. And what happened was after the recession, we stabilized the business. Half our customers had gone bankrupt. They took their receivables with them. It was a mess, but we stabilized. And in about 2009, I found myself with all kinds of time on my hands, right? I had all the time. The 17 guys that were left were all rock stars. They could run the business. They didn't need me. There wasn't much business anyway. So I had time, but not a lot of cash flow, because I had enough cash to feed my family. So our lifestyle stayed the same, but not enough to invest in any way, any meaningful way. But then I got a call from a buddy, and he said he had an idea about starting a nonprofit in Africa. And I said, great, I'll do it. I raised my hand, and he said, great, you're deputized. You do it. So my friend deputized me, and off we went. And we started something called LifeNet International. And so LifeNet franchises really faith-based health centers in Africa, and that's what we started in 2009. I was flying back and forth every 3 months. Today, it's quite something. It's based in DC. We're headed to 8 countries. We'll see 4 million patients this year. We've saved tens of thousands, maybe over 100,000 lives. It's a dramatic sort of story. And it's been such a blessing to be part of that and to run that. And today, that's our second big branch, if you will, in my organization. So the first one is our construction services building products business. The second one is LifeNet, right? And we'll get to the third one. So in the meantime, during those years, I'm flying back and forth to Africa. We're also buying companies in the US. So we bought some small companies that line extended us. They got us into countertops, and they got us into cabinets. They got us into the multifamily business. And in this way, we were finally executing on this diversification plan. And so the US business is getting stronger. The Africa nonprofit is growing and diversifying, and really things are going great. The next thing I did, I had time, because still the business wasn't really growing that fast, so I started a lacrosse team. So I started coaching lacrosse, and I started that team and wound up being a head varsity lacrosse coach, which turned out to be kind of one of the great joys of my life. It was really fun. I got to coach my girls, and so yes, the Great Recession cost us a lot of money, right? But I got wonderful time with my daughters at the critical years of middle school and early high school. Was able to start and participate in this nonprofit, which is amazing. And still we were able to capitalize in the business on the downturn by buying some competition and expanding. Okay, so I'm flying back and forth to Africa, and I realized some things, right? Some of the great mega trends of our time are happening in Africa. These are baked in directional things. So one is population increase. Population is growing in sub-Saharan Africa dramatically. The second is urbanization at a rapid pace. And the third is increasing GDP per capita. So the confluence of these three megatrends really create a wonderful and large and growing market to invest into. And so I decided I wanted to start a business in Africa. And in 2019, finally executed on that. After years of sort of research and kicking the tires, I joined with a partner. He moved to Kigali, Rwanda, and we've started an investment platform there. And we're investing in both in renewable energy, and we're investing in affordable housing. Both very large markets for the balance of my lifetime, in my view. Renewable energy obviously is hot, right? It's super hot in Africa. It serves multiple purposes. It brings electricity to places that are dark. It is obviously environmentally friendly, and it produces a great return on investment for our investors. So we're raising capital, LP capital, and we're the GP developer, or financing operator there in renewable energy in East Africa. And then we have an affordable housing business also. And so that is the third branch on the tree that we're operating in. So the future is bright. Here we are, kind of February, March 2020. 3 branches on the tree, things are great. And then what happens in March? COVID happens, right? And so I said, oh no, I've seen this movie, I know what happens. And I've been this before, kind of jumped in. Last time we cut fast, but it wasn't fast enough. And week 1, I'm in front of the whole company. I say, I've seen this movie before. We immediately cut salaries. We batten down the hatches. Here it comes. But in housing, we all know what happened. 3 months by June, we realized, oh wow, this isn't going to play out that way. Housing is actually accelerating. Our business is stable. The PPP, the first government stem, was approved and deployed. Things aren't so bad after all. So 2020 was actually a great year for us. I got my energy back. I had entered kind of Q1 2020. I was tired. I got a couple months at the beach when we were on lockdown, and I got my energy back. We participated in the government stem, which really bolstered our balance sheet at a time when we needed it because we're growing, right? And then housing starts to take off like a rocket. And so 2020 was really interesting. It was really a great year. And then in the fall of 2020, we did another acquisition. There was a company, a strategic, that was impacted by COVID. We bought them. They were distressed. That got us into the Texas markets and the Carolina markets. And it opened up Asia as they were importing heavily from various factories in Asia. So it really developed, we sort of acquired this importing expertise, which is very strategic in our multifamily segment. It brought us an office in Texas. They had competencies we didn't have. So we did yet again, we were able to buy on the dip, right? And so that was in the US. In Africa, there was a distressed affordable housing operator, and we bought their project and took them out, which accelerated that. So COVID was it was a great year for us. So the future, our belief is that we start small and grow, right? So that picture sort of denotes what, kind of the way I think about business is you start small, plant, and then let it grow. Probably a better picture would be these creeping vines, because it's also adjacent. See, some of these vines, they'll hop over. A vine will run over and start a new little vine plant over here and over here and over here. And that's the way I think about our business. So we're very excited about the future and continuing to kind of execute on this vision. So that's a mature oak. That's several hundred years old. It's gorgeous. And that's what we want to be when we grow up, right? I'd love for this business to be like that oak tree, over a century old, huge branches with many things going on. That's the future, and that's the analogy that I have in my head for where we want to go. My wife and I, another interesting thing in COVID is we really decided, this is a family business, and we do want it to continue into generations to come. And that alone, that decision has changed a lot in our family. It's been encouraging to my kids, and it's just made work more fun to make that decision. So that's a squirrel. And so why, and why is that a squirrel? Because these oak trees, they do lots of things. So squirrels eat the acorns, right? Oak trees provide shade when it's hot. The roots, they stabilize the soil. These trees play critical roles in our ecosystem, right? The tree benefits all these people and animals and everything around it. It's very important. So just like these trees, these are our businesses, right? Our businesses can play the same role in society that these trees play in the ecosystem. We can be good for shareholders. We can be good, obviously, for customers, but also more suppliers, as employers, as community citizens. There's so many ways our businesses, these evergreen businesses, benefit our society. It's wonderful to be that kind of a piece to play in our community. So that's a swing in my front yard. And on that swing, my 3 kids I've pushed them all, when they were little. And it's hanging on that tree, right? So just the way, the swing under the oak tree, I've raised my family. I've also raised my family under the business. And these two things are similar, and it's been a great joy. Thank you.